This isn't just us taking wood. This is about us managing cultural resources, economic resources, and human resources. So this is forest management.
By owning your own logging company and having your own members and machines, you were also able to say, hey, that falling boundary is a bit too close to a fish bearing river. We're just not going to do it. So you don't get better land management than owning it yourself.
The opportunities really are becoming abundant. It's nice to see. Yo, yo, ho, hey, yo, ho, hey, yo. Oh, 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 oh! Res Dog Walker, short episode. We're into season 3. There's some current events going on again that are just bugging me a little bit. So Res Dog Walkers has become like my therapeutic place where I get to talk about some issues of the day that are challenging me a little bit. I'm lucky enough today to have another good friend. I know I keep talking about that. I just keep bringing my friends on to talk about. But the next guest that I have on, I've probably known for about 25 years now. We work together on a lot of really great projects. But I'd like to introduce Art Wilson, Councillor from the We Wai Kai First Nation. How you doing, Art?
Good, good, good. So that's happy to join you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. As I was telling some of our listeners, you're the first office manager we've had for Nanwakolas, and the only the only referrals officer manager that we've had for Nanwakolas, and I've always appreciated the work you've done there. But over the last little while, you decided to take some steps for your community, and you've become, I believe, the highest vote earning council member for the We Wai Kai Nation. Why don't you just give a little introduction of yourself, bro?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like you said, my name's Art Wilson. I'm a counselor for the We Wai Kai First Nation here in Cambell River, and yeah, it's my second term. Almost not quite a year into the second term, but yeah. So and I for the nation, I handle our forestry portfolio, and a couple other natural resource portfolios, treaty portfolio, and economic development. So definitely keep very busy with our nation. And like you said, I'm also the manager for Nanwakolas Council in Cambell River since 2007. So hopefully doing a decent enough job to be here for that long so far anyway, right? So you haven't fired me, so we're okay. So
No, and Merv doesn't watch the podcast, so I think we should be okay on that side. So, um,
exactly.
you guys have been doing some great things. I know since Chief Chikite became chief, and you guys rejoined Numbuckles. I know that was a little bit weird for you working for us when your nation pulled out. But the door's always been open at Numbuckles, and I'm glad that Chief Chikite gave me a shout after the election and said to me, I know why some of the nations left, but I want to know why the ones that stayed. And that was really the starting point of a discussion that brought We Wai Kai and Numwakolas back together. And you guys have been doing some amazing things on economic development. So why don't you? I mean, we had Chief Chikite on early in the first season. I think he was in episode 3. But why don't you just give us a little update of some of the things that your nation, We Wai Kai is working on right now?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, yeah, when I first kind of got talked into running for council, it was with the sole purpose of helping grow our economy and through forestry in specifics. Right, yeah, we were a very small player in for the forest industry, right? I think we had 1 to 2 employees, if that. We maybe logged 20,000 cubic meters a year. With just the 2 employees, there was no certainty, no long term goal for forestry. It's kind of just here's a little bit of cut we have, and we're going to sell it all to one of the major licensees. We're not building our own capacity or anything like that. It was just here's our licenses. We're going to hire a couple people and just turn it into almost a make work tape. Since then, we when Roddy and I got into council. Roddy was a councillor before, but he was new to becoming chief, and so when I took on the forestry portfolio, it was with intent of growing the nation, and we've luckily enough been able to met all of our goals so far, and we're able to take it from, like I said, that 20,000 cubic meters a year, and now we're at that 225,000 cubic meters a year of our own wood. That's wood that's owned and managed and sold by We Wai Kai First Nation, and then we also have a harvest agreement with a local forest company, Mosaic, that we do about 120,000 cubic meters a year on top of our own private wood, and yeah, so with that comes a whole whack of jobs. We're at that probably, I think it was about 22 band members working for in between that and in forestry, and also the aggregate company that we own. We bought a wood bulldoze in Cambell River and started selling aggregate to BC Hydro and other local establishments in town. But yeah, it is a huge jump to go from 1 to 2 employees to 21, 22 kind of employees, and we're talking good paying jobs that you're not in town, or you're not in camp, right? I mean, you're home every night, you're with your family. It was a great feeling to have members from that moved to Alberta and Saskatchewan to take on work because they couldn't find local good paying jobs to start families with in Cambell River. So they ended up out in Alberta and Saskatchewan, kind of making that oil rig money and other jobs that they could run machines on. Once we started Wakey, our logging company that we own now, they came home, right? So it was a great feeling to see these younger guys, just have, newborn kids and that kind of age that are coming home and buying or building houses on our reserve and making a good living, right? So, and then, so that was a very, positive thing to see is just those guys coming home and that sense of pride of being back in their traditional territory. And the other side of it too, Dallas, is like, we not only is it the economy and the jobs, but it's by owning your own logging company and having your own members and machines, we're also able to say, hey, that falling boundary is a bit too close to a fish bearing river. We're just not going to do it, right? So like, and that gives us that power to say, hey, one of our members said they don't want to go that close to that arc site or that fish stream, whatever it is. They can shut it down, and no one is going to tell us the difference, right? Because it's our company, our machines, our contract. You can do what you want, right? I mean, so you don't get better land management than owning it yourself. They're your machines. You can do what you want, right? So it's a great thing to have, right? For sure.
Oh, that's huge. And, be able to see, some of them are my nephews, some of the guys who are working back in the territory now. And it's really nice to see that establishment of roots again. I mean, as you know, you and I are, I'm a little bit older than you, but we kind of grew up during the downfall of fishing. And so many of our brothers just had nothing else to do. They just thought they were going to be fishermen all their life. And now they work 2 days a year. And the social problems that come, the substance abuse and things like that, really got scary. So seeing your nation take the bull by the horns, so to say, and acquire some tenure, acquire some opportunity, get some equipment moving, those are some pretty bold steps to make. You do that in conjunction with, you guys are building a beautiful office tower. I know Nanwakolas is looking forward to moving up there later this winter. Into there, you guys got, finning up there, BC Hydro up there. The opportunities really are becoming abundant. It's nice to see.
Quick thing to add in there too, on top of the jobs and that bringing people home and stuff too, but we also have like an education fund that we've developed, right? So X amount of meters or X amount of money per meter that we harvest, if it's for a contractor or if it's our own person or wood, gets put away to an education fund. So we're able to bump up our allowance for our students to go to school, right? So now that rather than having to go to school to become an accountant or a lawyer or a nurse or whatever, we're able to provide some economic certainty to those members, so they're not having to go get a job at Starbucks or McDonald's or something when they're trying to study a very hard subject matter, right? So in return, it kind of allows us to come up with more educated band members. So when we start to look at treaties and stuff like that, we actually have membership that are doctors, lawyers, whatever, right? So, but without that certainty of giving them that money that we're making through forestry, right? I mean, doesn't exist, right? So, and then the other side is, there's obviously a huge opioid and drug crisis in BC and Canada, and we're able to take some of that funding. We're actually funding band members that want help. So if they're coming to us and saying, hey, I need some help, but the provincial government or whatever won't fund me, we're able to say, okay, here you go. Here's your $30,000. Go off and get better. And we have single moms getting their kids back. We have, people taking pride and we have people working for us that have gone through these programs, and, there's no better feeling than that, for sure. So, just wanted to aspect. So
Oh, that's so important. I mean, being able, that's why we develop resources and do own source revenue, so we can invest in the shortfalls that government has in their obligations to fiduciary responsibilities and all those sorts of things. You've been our referrals manager since 2007.
yeah,
You guys process what, 1,300 referrals a year
yeah.
or so?
I think last year we just shy of 1,600. I think last year,
Wow.
right? So
Wow.
yeah.
I remember when we first started, and you and I were driving down the high. I think you and I were driving to Victoria to
Yeah.
negotiate, something, and there was a bridge cleaning truck in front of us. And I remember you talking about the referrals for that. So over the years, we refined our system,
Yeah.
and it's put us in a position where, collectively through Nanwakolas, and we're so glad that We Wai Kai is back in membership with us again and working together. We've done some pretty cool things around forestry, and that's one of the things. I mean, I know that's what you did. You went to school for forestry. I know you went away and spent some time, and you brought your family with you and
Yeah.
got educated, and then came back home and used your knowledge to help us. I want to talk about a couple things, because you and I are dealing with a bit of a, I won't say it's a crisis, but it's an urgent matter right now. You and I worked together with Ted Nash, and we negotiated a tenure acquisition on behalf of We Wai Kai, We Wakam, Clawitsis, and Comox. And so the four nations together own, I think it's 38% of TFL 64, which is right in all of our traditional territories, kind of in the Kelsey Bay up to the Sitka Valley area. It's interesting both from the referral side, from your day to day job. We get all those referrals done. That is the only TFL on the island right now that gets its whole cutout because of the working relationship our referrals office has built with the companies and with the operating people in there. And while we've done all these great things to make this work and to keep people working, because in that TFL, there's not a lot of our people working in it.
No, no.
There's a lot of company crews and there's a union crew. And right now, you and I are dealing with a union strike there. Just some of your thoughts on that. We buy this thing in the best of interest. We keep the company crew because it's efficient. It's part of the business model. Just some of your thoughts on where we are as a We Become leader with
Yeah.
with the forestry portfolio. Just what's some of your thoughts on this USW strike that we're dealing with? I know it's new for me. I've been
Yeah.
through a lot of shit. I've negotiated a lot of things, but I've never dealt
Yeah.
with a union strike.
Yeah, no, and it's a very, frustrating thing to be involved in, right? I mean, and for us as First Nations, it's something that it's not new, right? I mean, this issue didn't come up just because of us owning part of La Quasimuk. This issue has been around since, my first days of when I first started working in the bush for MMB
With MMB, yeah.
yeah, and then, fast forward and so on, and we had, Chief Chris Roberts, when he worked for Nanwakolas, he was doing some economic development work for us back in the day, and he was had a great idea of getting some funding to train a bunch of our band members to go and learn how to run machines through a simulator, right? So we hired all of
Remember, we
this.
got to play with that simulator.
Yeah. So they brought it in, and how many guys got certified to run those machines? Everyone was so happy and so proud. And some of these guys that I was talking about that moved to Alberta took that course, right? But anyway, so they took the course, they got certified. They're like, hey, I can run machine now. They went out to look for jobs after this was done. We did all the whatchamacallit, like the job or job shadowing kind of thing, whatever you want to call it. And then, got certified, got the tickets or whatever, and then went to go find jobs only to have doors closed in our face saying that you have to have 2 years of experience running an excavator to work at the TFL. And it's like, well, how can you get that experience if we're not getting these jobs, right? So it was very unfortunate. That this is one of the reasons why We Wai Kai started our own company. We had too many doors shut on us and could not get jobs for our members because they didn't want to hire them. And the union have strongholds on these jobs. And I've had very frustrating meetings with unions where, you hear things like, oh, we have a lot of First Nations members working for you. There's some very great ladies that do cleaning for us. And it's like, whoa, right? So like it's very frustrating as a First Nations member and involved in forestry and wanting to move forward on that. But constantly getting those doors closed, right? So no union member has ever came to my reserve and said, "Hey, do you guys want a job or job training, job shadowing, whatever you want to call it?" We've never had that opportunity yet. Now that we buy into it, and a company like We Wai Kai is wanting to get our machines out in the TFL and out working, but we cannot because we're not union. And if you ask our members if they want to join the union, they do not. They do not want to join the union because of this past, past struggles where, we're never invited. And, if you look back in the old books, like We Wai Kai has been trying to get into forestry since, the 101 year, I believe, is the letter that we wrote to the government back in the day and said, "Hey, our chiefs wrote it. 3 chiefs signed this letter, and it said that the fishing industry is dying, basically, and that we want to look at other avenues for income, and forestry is one that they mentioned." So it's taken Ronnie and I, to take this on. And so it's been 101 years for We Wai Kai to finally get our foot in the door. So it's very frustrating that we make a massive investment into buying into TFL 64 and then have that door closed on us because of a union saying that you guys cannot go to work in this area because we have some crazy agreement with whoever the agreements are with the union. And it's and then talking to members from the union that, day-to-day guys that I know, and they're not understanding what they're even fighting, right? I mean, you talk to them, they say, "Oh, we're fighting contractors from coming in and taking our work away." And it's like, well, no, you're fighting against me and my people and my companies, right? So, and they don't get that. They don't understand it. They say, "Oh, wow, we didn't know that," right? So they don't understand that all we're trying to do is come in and harvest the undercuts and different things that the union is not harvesting right now. There would not be one loss of a union job. There would not be one change in a union job. All we want is access to the volume that they're not cutting, that we paid good money to be a part of this company. We want to be able to access that and make Lakwasimook as profitable as we can by harvesting the full AAC rather than not harvesting it. And I think if they truly understood that that's what we're coming in to do, we're coming in to basically save jobs, not take jobs away, right? But it's a misunderstanding, and it's a fear of, this typical fear that We Wai Kai has to deal with every time we get into an industry. It's First Nations are coming in, they're going to hire all of their cousins, and we're all going to get fired, and they're not going to. And now that guys work for Wakey, they say, "This is awesome. I've never been so happy to work with you guys," right? I mean, like I said, we have 20-something band members working, and how many non-First Nations working? 3 times more non-First Nations working for We Wai Kai than First Nations. So it just goes to show, we're not there to take the jobs and shut the companies down. We're there to enhance them and provide certainty so everyone can continue to work for the next 50, 100 years, kind of thing, right? So it's very, very frustrating with the misunderstanding between the unions and First Nations, right? I mean, if we were to actually have full out transparent conversations, I think they realize that we have a lot more in common than we do against each other, right? It's just, we want an opportunity to go to work just like they fought to have unions. And, like I was saying back in the past, we have 1911 and older censuses from my reserve. And in those, a lot of the First Nations members back then, a lot of my family are listed as loggers. They logged. And then come, 1911 and on, and after the Great Depressions, all this stuff, First Nations were not allowed to work in forestry anymore. You had to hire non-First Nations to take the job. So we lost out on those jobs as well, right? So and we've been fighting ever to get back into it, right? I mean, it's crazy amount of people that from our nations that did log back in the day and then just got the boot because they didn't have the right skin color. Right? So and the unions have fought hard to protect their members and their people, and that's all Ronnie and I are trying to do too, is just to make it an even playing field so we can have jobs without having to join unions. That's just, to me, that's we can't just join unions. We need to fight for our nation, right? So not just.
Well, and you're so right, because we've done all that work, and where we can, we work together. And in TFL 64, the 4 nations are working together, and as you know, I'm sort of leading the negotiations against the union, and I shouldn't even say it's against the union. I'm leading the negotiations to try solve the problems that the union have there, but they're not actually putting them on the table. They're not coming to the bargaining table. We've asked the province, and this is the interesting side of this, is where is the province going to come in on this? Because they helped us with some of the investment investment that we made in this, but they also receive the royalties, the stumpage, the taxes from the workers
Yeah.
that are in this. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the government finally works to try to bring a solution as opposed to just trying to ignore it right now. But this is what I want to get into is, we could pound the table and we could complain and bitch and moan, and that doesn't really get us anywhere. So what I want to do is, and this is an interesting episode because we're not going to release this episode till after the canoe celebration and the log blessing celebration. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the plans that we've decided. As you know, as you were kind of one of the developers of it, Nanwakolas Council has what's called a large cultural cedar protocol that we have with all the operating companies in our territories. And one of the things that I wanted our listeners to be able to hear that we've done, before the actual rubber hits the road on this is, you and I have been developing a plan to show the union and the province and general public that we can log our territories pretty easily. We have the equipment, we have the wherewithal, we have capacity thanks to We Wai Kai and some of the organizations that you guys have been developing. But just tell me some of the work that I know I asked you and James Hogan to go look into some falling of culturally modified, or not culturally modified trees, large cultural cedar trees that we can use for canoes and totem poles and all that. So why don't you just talk about a little bit of the planning work that you're doing for us to cross the picket line and actually harvest a couple of these logs to show people that this is what we're about. This is forest management. This isn't just us taking wood. This is about us managing cultural resources, economic resources, and human resources. So just give me some of your thoughts and the work that you and James are doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that was, comes to one of the reasons why we wanted to be owners in Nanwakolas as well, too, is because, it's always been a problem in the past to get large cedar trees or a good grade cedar tree to a carver so they can continue to practice our traditions, hand down our culture, all those things that come with carving, right? I mean, it's not just carving, it's learning the stories behind that figure that they're carving. It's learning the history of the Leap people. It's, learning all those things that comes with carving. So, that was one of the major bonuses is we said, hey, we're going to be owners to this. So when we want a cedar, we're able to just hit up Nanwakolas and say, hey, we need a 5-foot cedar by X amount of feet, whatever. And then that's being delivered off when they're logging and operating. Due to the strike, we cannot do that because no one is logging. So now our culture, our traditions, all of this stuff that had such great momentum of carvers being like, in all my years of carving, I've never had this kind of access to cedar, right? Mm-hmm. So now because of this strike, the picket lines for the union and all this kind of stuff, we can't actually have these cedar trees delivered to us. And now we have to take a different plan, which is the plan that we're talking about, of going out and harvesting them on our own, which is going to cost the nation money, which is very unfortunate. But, we'll have to go out of our way to keep our culture and our traditions alive by harvesting these trees. And it's unfortunate that way it comes to this, but we have to do it, and we'll have to cross the picket lines to do it, and as our right is to do so. So we're currently looking at different areas that are best suited to find these. So, and the least cost. So, something closer to a road, something that has already been identified by our guardians who are the identifiers of the large cultural cedars and the managers of them. So we're working with all of them to go out, find the right area, and in the very, very near future, we'll go out and harvest enough of these trees to keep our nation members carving and those traditions alive. You mentioned our new band office that's going up there. That comes with a whole bunch of carvings of Leap history that need to be put in place and need to be blessed and started before their opening. So we cannot sit around and wait for negotiations for unions that doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. We have to move forward. So we'll move forward with all of our nations together and supply the cedar. So we, like I said, we can keep those culture alive and keep those traditions going. Right. So yeah.
And I mean, you hit the nail right on the head about the cultural side of it. I mean, so many people think we're involved in forestry just for the actual logging. You identified the fact that because you own some of the tenure in your area, the 245 you're acquiring and the other things, we're doing a lot more around sustainability. You and I have been, helping manage elk herds and managing elk hunt, and forestry is a big major part of that. But I want to talk about CUSM specifically right now. When you and I first met, when we were both young, very young men,
Yeah.
All of our treaty negotiators were trying to protect what was called the hotel block. And this is just for
Yep.
our listeners. I mean, I know you understand this, but there's a certain couple blocks. There's a mountainside within, the Sayward Valley that is culturally sensitive to us. It has thousands of culturally modified trees in there that show our time and use of the area over generations. And they're really at an impasse. And so, who thought that the two young, 25 and 27-year-old guy, along with one of our old planners, Wally Emer, could sit down and negotiate a peace agreement with Western Forest Products of where we were able to preserve those specific blocks that we actually use for training our guardians. Our guardians go in there, and that's where they learn to identify cultural cedar and all those, cultural uses, modified trees, and all those sorts of things. But maybe why don't you just explain part of the project that's going on in there with the living totems? I think that's a really important aspect.
Yeah, like exactly, like the nations were trying to protect that area forever, right? I mean, as a guy that was on the logging side and the forestry side and the engineering side, I too, was up there at one
Oh, there's some
point
beautiful timber.
ribbons, hanging ribbons, saying this is where we're gonna log, and then just being back in those days not understanding the very important aspect of that area, right? And then fast forward and and then getting coming to work for the nation side and then understanding the importance of it and how long they've been fighting it for, and then exactly, you and I had a talk and said like, hey, let's get this over with, right? I mean, enough's enough. We're not going to allow you to log that, right? I mean, they were playing games. They would take engineer a block and then change the name and drop that block off at the band office at 4 o'clock, and hoping somebody would slip up and say, if you don't answer within 20 days, we're going to approve it. Hoping somebody didn't catch on. That happened for years and years and years, and then finally, when Nicola started taking on forestry, it was one of our main things that we wanted to do is like, hey, let's put an end to this, right? And I remember we called the meeting and Bob Pollard slammed his fist on the table and said, what part of effing no don't you understand? and you said, okay, perfect, I can work with that. And fast forward to now, we have a 400 hectare reserve zone that protects that area, protects all the CMTs in the area, the plank strip trees, the partial canoes, the stumps that were logged, the cedar stripping, all that stuff, and now it's used for exactly what it should be, an educational forest, and a forest that hopefully we'll study to learn about First Nations forestry. Why did they take the planks off the tree instead of falling it and taking them off then? They took planks off of a living standing tree. Why didn't they just fall it? Why didn't they, why did they leave 5 beside it and move on to the next one to do a falling tree or whatever, right? I mean, we need somebody to do studies on that. So now that area is reserved, so we can do that one day. And then now, and that was what we wanted to pay tribute to, the harvesting in that area before. And it's a perfect area. It's a Lake Widow and Comox. There's a lot of different people travel through that bush and put their marks on it. So it was a perfect area to go in, send our carvers in for the first round. They made a dugout canoe. This year they made 3 standing totem poles where they carved the poles right into there, and they'll be there until they grow over. And then as well another canoe. So like, and just hearing what the master carvers taught to their apprentices, and then what even myself learned around culture, some language and all that stuff, just from being up there sitting down with great elders like Max, and very very strong culturally important people like Junior and Carver as well. These guys know history, they know the language, and it's great to have that passed on, but not passed on in a class or passed on anywhere else, but out in the field and out in the bush where hundreds of years ago our ancestors were doing the exact same thing on that exact same hill. So to us it's very very important that that site is always protected, and to continue to use for the training of or the teaching and training of culture. If it's carving, if it's medicinal plants, if it's harvesting berries or whatever, that we have an area for that, right? And an area that is old growth forest that is opened, and that having a 400 hectare reserve zone like that, and then a whole bunch of other very very great reserve zones and rules and practices that Nanwakolas Council put in place, has given certainty to nations like We Wai Kai to say, hey, we're okay with harvesting of TFL 64 now, because we have enough, we have stuff put away. We have rules in place that we review every single block before it's logged. So we run it, you run by it and say, okay, yeah, we're okay with that block being logged, and no, we're not okay with this block because there's elk in it or there's too much cedar in it, whatever, right? I mean, it's but because we have these reserve zones, it does allow us to open up some areas for commercial harvesting to get back to the things that I first talked about around, education, economics for the band, helping build cultural programs. All that stuff costs money, right? I mean, you know, right, clear enough. If you have to have a healthy economy to have a healthy community, right? And for us, it's, if you don't have one, it's hard to have the other, right? So like for us, we want to make that money, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we have areas protected, and stuff like the QSM forest is an area that we can sleep at night knowing that there's 400 hectares of our culturally important area protected forever. Right? So
Definitely.
it's huge for We Wai Kai, right? So yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, I appreciate the time you give me today, and it's interesting how we've developed these strategies that aren't even, they're not combative. We're not picking fights with anybody. We're just showing people what we do. We're managing a forest for a vast number of different principles that, make our people who they are, but we're also focused on the economic side and opportunity. So, I mean, I really hope that we can keep working to bring an end to this strike, which is a bit of a black mark in the development of our relationship and our introduction and engagement with the forest industry. But I think we're doing it in an educational way. The event that we're having on August 27th, we're going to bless the latest new canoe that Max Chakite, Junior Henderson, and Carver Everson just created with, I think, 9 apprentices. They had 9 different youth there learning with them how to actually make a canoe, which, there's not a lot of canoe makers anymore. So it's really awesome that this area was able to bring our people together when we've been splitting apart on other political issues and things like that. So I think it's going to be a really nice healing event. But at the same time, like you said, we're going to be harvesting some cultural logs and blessing them that are going to be used going forward as other educational pieces. Just before we go, the one thing that I want to kind of ask you about, as a, you've been in the forest industry for a long time. You went to school for it. I know your son's following in your footsteps. I know that must make you pretty proud to watch. I want to say little Marcellus, but he's bigger than both of us. To watch Marcellus do what he's doing. But your dad, your dad and I are close friends. He's one of the respected elders that, I go to from time to time. Your dad's a cedar weaver. I imagine he's probably collected cedar from QSM for some of the beautiful hats that he's made. I wish I was wearing he made me a beautiful cowboy hat last year that I get quite a few compliments on. But just your thought on the generational aspect. You talked about, the letters that were written in the early 1900s by the chiefs of We Wai Kai to, protest how we're being shut out of these things. And now that you're there and there's 3 generations of your family that are really helping to keep this moving, just some of your thoughts as a community member who plays a role in council, but also in the management side through your job with Nanwakolas. Just what does it feel like for you to be doing what you're doing? Like you're engaging it and you're making it work. Just some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's huge, right? And it's a game changer for our nations and for families personally too, right? I mean, it's like you said, my dad is a cedar hat weaver, and cedar, like, he makes homicide ropes, he makes all different stuff through cedar, and there was kind of almost that aspect where, before we became owners and licenses and having, area based and all that kind of stuff, is like, oh, okay, like, oh, that we want to go harvest some cedar. Are we allowed to go here? Are we allowed to go there? Are we going to get in trouble if we go strip this tree? And it's, my generation, and from working with you guys, like you and Merv, and all the great Bob and Ralph, and all Stu, or all these great leaders that we've got that fortunate enough to work with. It's, no, it's ours. It's our resource. We own it, right? So like, there's a big difference in the generational gaps, that now that we're starting to become owners in these things, we understand that that's our right to go there. It's our right. We own that cedar, as long as we do take pride in protecting it. As so, when they're harvesting, they're only harvesting a certain amount of the tree. They're only taking it at certain times of the year, so it has no impact or minimal impact and damage to the trees that they're harvesting from. So it's like so having an area like Wassamut TFL 64 that if we want to, we can work with the managers and operation managers. Say before you log a block, we're going to come out and strip the cedar. And they say, oh, that's great. Here's a map. They've personally given my dad and other cedar carvers maps to say, here, go out and harvest all you want from this area because it's going to be gone. We're harvesting it. So it's it's great for them to have that feeling that they can actually go out in their territory and gather the cedar and do it in a proper manner and use it to hand on another generation that's not, or another cultural aspect that isn't just carving, it's weaving, it's all that kind of stuff. And berry pickers as well, they've asked me, oh, you get permission to go here? It's okay, yes, you can. We're owners, right? So and that's an important thing about us owning personal licenses in Bear, Rock Bay and all that stuff, is we're able to send members out there to do that. And then that pride too, like I'm very happy that my son has chosen to go down the forestry path, because he's able to take what he's learned from me and expand it, right? So it just, my mind always kind of gets very happy when you think about the future, because we're creating these educated people that know our history and know our background and know our rights, and we're able to do a good job from what we know. So I can only imagine what they're going to do with what we've handed on to them. And the rights and title that they know that we have is to me, we're going to continue to grow up and to continue to take more ownership of our land. And that's why it's super important that we figure this out with these unions, because they're the only ones, unfortunately, and I don't think they understand, they are the only ones holding us back from the economic and the cultural side of things right now. And I think if 90% of them knew that, I don't think we'd be in this situation right now, right? So it's educational aspect, right?
I think you're so right. And I mean, I think the strategies that we've been taking and using to deal with this issue have been respectful, they've been cultural, and it's really reconciliation in practice. Dude, thank you. You're always sort of there when I need you for work stuff. And, the podcast is a new thing and we're having some fun with it. And maybe we'll get you back on with our, with my sister, your cousin, Jody Wilson-Raybould, another fellow band member. And I look forward to having you on the show again soon.
Awesome. Anytime. We appreciate the opportunity.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and remind everybody that BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference is June 3rd to 5th in Nanaimo. We're just going to keep raising the bar on the discussion. There's so many important issues that people need to have a better understanding when it comes to reconciliation and sustainable resource development. And we really look to help lead those discussions and just help clarify a lot of misinformation that's out there. So I want to thank our listeners for being here. I want to thank Art for being here and joining me today. And I really look forward to seeing you all soon. Gela Kasla. Ow, ow, ow. Yo, yo, ho, hey, yo, yo, ho, hey, yo, hey, 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 yo, Cambell